another episode of the Kam Johal Show. ਸਤਿ ਸ੍ਰੀ ਅਕਾਲ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ ਘਰਾਂ 'ਚ ਬੈਠੇ ਸਾਡਾ ਪ੍ਰੋਗਰਾਮ ਦੇਖ ਰਹੇ ਆ. So I hope it's been an amazing week for you guys. We've certainly been busy, and the COVID situation continues, but the vaccination program rolling out has been very, very successful. So ਜਿਹੜੇ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਚਿੱਠੀਆਂ ਆਈਆਂ ਆ ਤੇ vaccination ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਰਾ ਲਵੋ ਉਹ ਕਰਾ ਲੈਣੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ. We had a program a few weeks ago just talking about the problems in our community. ਬਹੁਤ ਥੋੜੇ ਬੰਦੇ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ accept ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਆ. But hopefully from the news that I'm gathering is that our community is fully on board and ਆਪਣੇ vaccination ਦੇ ਟੀਕੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਲਵਾ ਰਹੇ ਆ. So I hope you carry on with that, especially ਜਿਹੜੇ ਆਪਣੇ mums and dads and uncles and aunties who are eligible right now. So, and again, as I said, it looks like what's going to happen is we're going to end up with travel passports. So agar tusi tika nahi laya, you won't be able to go to India, you won't be able to travel abroad in the very near future. So agar tusi trips karna chahne hain, we're going to end up having the vaccination. So tonight I've got a fantastic show for you. I've got a lovely guest, very, very successful in her own right, Sukh Randhawa. I'm going to introduce her in a few minutes. So she's a global transformation coach, works on an international stage. We're very, very lucky. By pandemic karke, she's at home and been in this country for a while. Otherwise, she's globe-trotting around the world in a fantastic career that spans over 15 years now. So I'm going to bring her on the show and introduce you to my dear friend, Sukh Randhawa. Welcome, Sukh.
Thank you, Kam, for the lovely introduction. Sat Sri Akal ji ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ. Kam, thank you ਤੁਹਾਡਾ opportunity ਦੇਣ ਲਈ ਕਿ ਇੱਥੇ ਆਉਣ ਲਈ. ਮੈਂ ਕੋਸ਼ਿਸ਼ ਕਰੂੰਗੀ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਜਵਾਬ ਦੇਣ ਲਈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਮੇਰੇ ਕੋ ਪੰਜਾਬੀ ਚ ਦੇ ਹੋਵੇ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ English ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਦੇਵਾਂਗੀ. And Kam, you are spot on. My parents are very grateful and that I'm in the country given the pandemic. So there's definitely a silver lining in this household.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Look, it's about opportunities, isn't it? And whatever, you can't do anything about what happens to you, but you can only do you can only react to it well, right? So the Randhawa household is indeed fortunate that you're in the country for such a long space of time.
I hope they still agree, but yes.
Yeah. So tell us, one of the things that we discuss often is ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਣੀ community ਆ, there's a lot of successful people here, but we didn't all start successful, and we all started in usually quite humble beginnings because either we or our parents came into this country, and it's not like we came with money. We came as immigrants, and our parents or ourselves worked very, very hard. So tell me a little potted history of the Randhawa household and where you guys are settled.
Okay, fantastic. I think our story is not too dissimilar to many Punjabis watching this show. My parents are both from India. They came here, and I think the story goes there was £5 or £6 in the pocket. My parents worked very, very hard when they got here, and they luckily were able to, with their hard work, get some opportunities and break some barriers that other people weren't able to do even at that time. So now, cut long story short, my dad has had a successful business. We grew up my dad had shops, and we worked he's also in the property business. My mum supported him wholeheartedly. But we didn't have everything growing up. My parents taught us that we have to have hard work and education in order for us to be able to have the opportunities that they didn't have. And given that upbringing, that's a lot of created the foundations for the work that I do actually, of trying to strive to be better and break those barriers that they didn't have the opportunities to even have when they were coming into the country.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because that is the story of our community, that our fathers and our forefathers have instilled this amazing work ethic within us. And it's great to see the generations that are carrying on with that. And that's what's bringing a lot of success. So, we often see parallels, like you said, £5 or £6 in their pocket, but they made good. Your family, a little bit different in terms of the fact that they had their own business, because a lot of our community didn't start their businesses until the late 70s and 80s, etc. So Dad had his own business. Which part of the country, Sukh?
So we're in Buckinghamshire. So we're in the south. I have to say my dad did also work in Mars, so we're a proud Mars family. And I've got absolutely fond memories of when Dad worked there, and we would get the bags of chocolate, and we were the most popular family in our extended family, where Dad would come, and it was a great time to be young. And so I just wanted to make sure that he did do that hard work and then grew his business as time went and the opportunities arose. So we're, to answer your other question, we're in Buckinghamshire, and we grew up in a predominantly white village. I think we were the only coloured people in our village when I was young. And to be honest, if I look back at that time, I didn't even know I was different. I remember going to school and being told to go back to where I came from, and as a young child, that I didn't understand it. I would think, well, why should I go back home? I need to be at school today. I don't need to be back at home because I just assumed they meant back to my home in the village, not necessarily my parental home and my grandparental home back in Punjab. So that's a bit of experiences that I've had to go through that maybe other people haven't had to go through, and they stay with me up until now, actually.
Really? So, look, we've all suffered some form of discrimination, but it's interesting, isn't it, that as a child you didn't feel any different. You were in a minority in a little village, and so you thought, what on earth are they talking about? Why should I go home? I need to be at school, right? Because home was
Yeah.
in the village, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's what I genuinely didn't have a clue. And I started asking my mom, what does that mean? And then I won't use some of the slurs that were said, because it's not nice to hear them on the TV, but I'm sure we can all imagine. But however, I don't want to dwell on that. I really want to focus on the learnings that we've had from that. And me personally, I've taken those learnings and I've grown as a person. And I actually believe that I'm the person that I am today because of those hardships and because of having to face those adversities and having to actually take them, challenge those up front. And if I hadn't had to, then maybe I wouldn't be where I am today.
Look, you are, your experiences, aren't you? So, but you can use them positively or you can use them negatively. And clearly, as we shall discover, you've used all those experiences in a very positive way to impact not only yourself, but now you're impacting the wider community, which is
Yes.
absolutely brilliant. That brings us nicely to, so, you go to school, you go to university, and what kind of jobs did you have first when you first started?
Okay, so it's a bit of a funny story. I went to university, did my standard computer science degree, and then afterwards, I at that time it was not enough just to have a degree, and I felt like I hadn't excelled as much as I should have academically. So I then went on to study as being an accountant. However, I do not work as an accountant. Please don't ask me. And I think that's something also my family are not very proud of me, because they would want me to do their accounts and I don't do those. But what I realized is quite quickly, so I did that accounting degree and then I moved, not accounting degree, sorry, accountancy qualification. And then quite quickly I realized that I wanted to travel. I'm so blessed to have born in this country, and that's thankful to my parents and my grandparents, right? So they faced so many adversities to allow my parents to come over here and then give me the education. So I've always been acutely aware of the fact that I've got this passport and I've got this capability that not a lot of people have, right? So from our culture, there's lots of people that don't necessarily get even a visa to come to this country. So I've always been aware of that. And then I wanted to have an international career. I wanted to travel. And I remember actually being at functions when I was younger, and there being the running joke with the extended family, because my sister's a solicitor, my brother is in the banking industry and he's a banker. And some of my aunties would say, "Put tu bhi kuch ban ja, tu to chuttiyan te jandi rehndi." Because my career quite quickly took me from that kind of financial background into a Mexican cement company. Actually, I worked for a company called Cemex, which is Cementos Mexicano in Spanish. And that was unheard of at that time, right? It was a construction industry, which is traditionally male dominated. And that was a fantastic kind of shift. So as soon as I joined that company, I was provided with a lot of opportunity, but a lot of hard work, right? Because it was male dominated. I'm an ethnic minority, so being a woman of color, I had to put in a lot of graft to make opportunities for me. But because I had the support of my parents, even though society may not have provided me with those opportunities, I had to really work hard for them. When those opportunities arose in my career, so there was a bit of a crossroads in my career, and I'll tell you about that in a second. I was so lucky that I didn't have to then battle with my parents to allow them to kind of get permission to accept that opportunity, because I know that's another thing that happens in our culture on a number of occasions. So just before I tell you the story, मैं पंजाबी च कहना चाਹੁंदी है कि जेडे तुसी आ शो देख रहे आ जे थोड़े को न्याणे होगे नाले ओह कोई काम करना चाਹੁंदे आ जेड़ा हैगा मे बी अकाउंटेंसी ना होवे डॉक्टरी ना होवे जेड़ा आप ट्रेडिशनल पाथ कह लो है ना मैं कहंदी आ कि ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਦਿਓ ਕਿ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਵੀ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਚੰਗਾ ਲੱਗਦਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਐਕਸੈਪਟ ਕਰਦੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਦਿਓ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਕਰਨ ਲਈ ਕਿ ਸਾਡੇ ਲਈ ਬਹੁਤ ਔਖਾ ਆ ਸੋਸਾਇਟੀ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੈ ਨਾ ਕਿ ਉੱਥੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਾਡੇ ਕੋਲ ਸਟੰਬਲਸ ਬਲੌਕ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਸਾਨੂੰ ਘਰ ਨਹੀਂ ਬਣਾਉਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਇਹ ਮੈਂ ਥੋੜੀ ਬੇਨਤੀ ਕਰਨੀ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਸੀ sorry Cam but I just wanted to take that opportunity to say that
That's
to the audience.
fabulous. Yeah, I'm just going to shut up now and let you do the rest of the show.
I'm
And
happy to do
look,
that. It's part of my job, so I'm happy to facilitate. So
look,
to
it's wonderful. Go on, sorry. It's absolutely wonderful. That message, we can't say it loud enough because, post-COVID, the world's going to change massively. Those traditional jobs are gone. And we're, in our community, we're very traditional. We want to do the right thing. And, those traditional roles of solicitors, accountants seem very, very safe. But if you look going forward, AI and such technologies like blockchain, the white collar jobs is what's going to go next. So if a child's got something that's other than that, encourage it. We've had plenty of guests on the show now that haven't followed the traditional role. Because, I mean, let's face it, you could have quite comfortably stayed in accountancy, couldn't you?
Yes, to be honest, I could have, but knowing myself, I simply did it to tick a box, right? If I'm going to be brutally honest, if my boss from those days is watching, I do apologize. But I knew early on that it wasn't something that I wanted to do, but I did that qualification because I always knew I wanted to be in business. And I chose the SEMA qualification because I was cognizant of the fact that if I have an accountancy, a management accounting qualification, when I want to set up my own business or if I want to be in the corporate industry for a longer time, having that understanding how organizations work is absolutely critical. So I'm not shunning having those type of qualifications and that experience. And I actually believe in our schooling system, we should be teaching life skills and financial management hand in hand with mental health and those type of skill sets as well. But that we can save that for a separate show. But you're right. I could have sat in that path, but I chose not to. I always knew I wanted to do more with my skill set and give back to the world in a different way rather than just spreadsheets. Not that it counts as a spreadsheet.
So let's just hold on to that thought for a moment, because at that point in time, you're relatively young, so your parents could have influenced you quite heavily into staying into accountancy. So you mentioned the support of your family, and this is where parents really need to step in and say, look, you can shape the mind of somebody that's relatively young in their early 20s and apply pressure and sometimes subliminal pressure into what should go on. So that would have been a big part that your parents actually supported you in that. And again, you've been fabulous in putting the message out. What would you say to parents of people coming out of university or about to enter university in diverse education and diverse jobs that they're looking for? What advice would you offer to both the students and the parents?
So firstly, I would say to the students, study whichever subject you are interested in, right? Because if you're interested in a subject, you're more likely to spend your time and energy in working and studying on that. But I'd equally like to say, if academia is not the path you want to take, and you are more arts or you're more sports, then please take that path as well. We do not have to follow a traditional path. There are those stereotypes that we've all touched upon, but we need to be aware that there are other opportunities that can provide us with fantastic careers. So that would be my plea to the children that are at that point of making a decision. Don't study something you don't want to study, right? Don't do something that is not really it's part of your doesn't get you out of bed, right? It's not of your passion. And then I would say to the parents ਕਿ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਮੌਕਾ ਦਿਓ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਗੱਲਾਂ ਕਰੋ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਣੋ, because ਇਹ ਤਾਂ ਹੈ ਨਹੀਂਗਾ ਕਿ ਉਹ ਦਿਨ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਇਦਾਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਸੀ ਉਦਾਂ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੀਦਾ ਕਿ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਨਾ ਮੇਰਾ ਕੰਮ ਹੈਗਾ ਡਾਈਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਤਾਂ ਇਨਕਲੂਜਨ। ਡਾਈਵਰਸਿਟੀ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਕਿ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੇ ਲੋਕੀ ਹੋਣੇ ਚਾਹੀਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦੀ ਸੋਚ ਹੋਣਾ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ। ਸੋ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੇ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਦੀ ਵੀ ਸੋਚ ਨੂੰ ਸੁਣੋਗੇ ਤਾਂ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੀ ਡਾਈਵਰਸ ਥਿੰਕਿੰਗ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ ਸਮਝ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਆਓਗੇ, ਫਿਰ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਆਪਣੀ ਦੋਨੇ ਸੋਚਾਂ ਲੈ ਕੇ ਸਲਾਹ ਨਾਲ ਗੱਲ ਕਰ ਸਕਦੇ ਆ ਤੇ ਇਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਹੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਆ। ਕਿ ਜੇ ਸਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਬਹੁਤ ਕੁਝ ਪਤਾ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਕੋਲ ਵਰਕ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਤੇ ਲਾਈਫ ਐਕਸਪੀਰੀਅੰਸ ਬਹੁਤ ਜ਼ਿਆਦਾ ਹੈਗਾ ਆ। ਮੈਂ ਇਦਾਂ ਨਹੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਕਿ ਨਿਆਣਿਆਂ ਨੂੰ ਆਪਣੇ ਮਾਪੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ। ਮਾਪੇ ਹੋਣ ਜਾਂ ਹੋਰ ਕੈਰੀਅਰ ਹੋਣ, ਜੇ ਤਾਈ ਚਾਚੇ ਮਾਸੀ ਭੂਆ, ਹਰੇਕ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਸੁਣਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ। ਪਰ ਉਹ ਦੂਜੇ ਸਿਆਣੇ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਕਹਿੰਦੀ ਆ ਕਿ ਤੁਹਾਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਨਿਆਣੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਸੁਣਨੀ ਚਾਹੀਦੀ ਆ। ਤੇ ਜੇ ਇਹਦਾ ਹੀ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਕਿ ਡਾਈਵਰਸ ਹੋਣਾ ਤਾਂ ਇਨਕਲੂਸਿਵ ਹੋਣਾ। ਡਾਈਵਰਸ ਦਾ ਮਤਲਬ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੋਨੇ ਜਾਣੇ ਇੱਕ ਟੇਬਲ ਤੇ ਬੈਠ ਕੇ ਰੋਟੀ ਖਾ ਲਈ, ਫਰਜ਼ ਕਰੋ, ਪਰ ਜਦ ਤੱਕ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੀ ਗੱਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸੁਣਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਇੱਕ ਦੂਜੇ ਦੀ ਉਹ ਗੱਲ ਤੇ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਅਹਿਮੀਅਤ ਨਹੀਂ ਰੱਖਦੇ ਤਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਉਹ ਜਦ ਤੱਕ ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਫਾਇਦਾ ਨਹੀਂ ਹੋਣਾ। So that's what I would try and say, right? Because it's ultimately critical if we want, as minorities, if we want to be successful in all industries, right? Across all paths, we need to be able to know where we've come from, where we're going. But dialogue and communication is absolutely key. So I'm not saying go against your parents, but I'm saying let's talk to each other and let's educate each other. And then take those opportunities and decisions together.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because the thing about that is the parents are the ones with the life experiences. The parents are the ones that have seen a little bit of the world. And you, as somebody that's a little bit younger, hasn't got that part. But then you've got the education and you've got, the ideas that are modern and can take things forward. So if both of those parties come together, you can truly be an unstoppable force within that family, can't you?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's why I talk about neuro-linguistic programming, for example, right? So if we think about how our brains operate, so we talked about our parents and the older generation. We need to understand their upbringing, right? So what they value and how their mental programming is set up. How do they make decisions? And they make decisions based on their life experiences, the languages that they speak. And that ultimately, if we think about sounds and smells and all of these, I won't get too scientific, but neuro is about the kind of the senses. And then the linguistic is the language that we use, and ultimately put it together, we have our neuro-linguistic programming, and that's how we think and how we solve problems and how we react to situations, right? So if we take the time to understand our parents, we've got that capability, which maybe our parents may or may not have, right? But I think it's our duty as the younger generation to give back, to be grateful for their opportunities, but equally take the time to explain our perspective and say to mum and dad or masi chachi tai or whoever your carers are at home that ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀ ਹਨਾ ਮੰਮੀ, ਮੈਂ ਸਕੂਲ ਗਈ ਸੀ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਨੂੰ ਇਦਾਂ ਹੋਇਆ ਸੀਗਾ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਆਹ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ ਕੰਮ ਤੇ, ਮੈਂ ਆਹ ਕਰਨਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਮੈਂ ਗਾਉਣਾ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੀ ਆ, ਨਹੀਂ ਤਾਂ ਮੈਂ sports karna chahundi. I would not do sports or singing, I'm just giving examples, but those are the type of things, if together we can make good decisions.
Amazing advice. So we've touched on a little bit about the work that you actually do, but the interesting thing that you talked about a little bit earlier was, just being grateful for the fact that if your grandfather or your father or your mother or your Chachadaya didn't come to this country, they didn't have the foresight, because it wasn't easy, was it? My granddad came in 1951 and came on a ship and spent 31 days. And imagine traveling 4,000 miles without much money, not knowing the language, having no contacts whatsoever. The courage that these guys had to actually take that step. Because most of us, come from fairly middle classish families from back home. We were pretty comfortable because the cost of getting here was quite high at that point. So you still had to make your own way. You had no Rishdar to come to. So, if you think about the fact that we have only landed here because of our forefathers and their ambition and their foresight, then you know what? Life becomes a little bit easy. You're not entitled to anything, are you, in this life? And
No.
I go back to India and I look at some people, and you see people that have got no opportunity in comparison to what we have here. And all of a sudden, it brings it home to you what a great country we actually live in and what a great choice our forefathers made. So as soon as you start thinking about those things, then I suppose you have a little bit more respect for your elders, don't you, than perhaps sometimes the West teaches us to bestow, because there's not a lot going on in Western society in terms of respect for elders. We sometimes think that as you get older, you're getting a little bit dotty and it's all about the young. But if you look at really, really successful families, established successful families, then the parents use their experience to help their children to fast track their careers and fast track them in entrepreneurship. And it's the experience of the elders that's used, especially in earlier formative years of business and in career.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, sir?
No, I agree with that. I think we have to be grateful, right? We have to be able to look back before we move forward. And I am acutely aware of that I have, right? So obviously I've spoken about the adversities that we faced, that I faced when I was growing up here, and the challenges of being a woman of color, and trying to break maybe the glass ceiling. However, I am definitely aware of, when I look back, given that we are only, as you say, my parents were born in Punjab. So the fact that I easily, at the flip of a coin, my parents may not have come here. So I am very aware that I could have been born in Punjab. And therefore, my passport, actually, I have a very emotional connection to my passport, because I'm sure you know this, and I'm not sure if many of our audience members may be able to relate. But lots of our families that are still over there haven't been able to have access to a passport. And if they did get a passport, they wouldn't been able to get a visa to come over here. So personally speaking, my BBG was my bebe, so my dad's mum. We were very lucky to have her here with us. But my BBG and my Papaji on my mum's side were both in India. And we fought for most of my life to get them a visa to come over. And my BBG was able to come over once. However, I can't fathom that, right? So I've got first cousins over there that can't just jump on a plane whenever they want. And whereas me, with my passport, if there wasn't the pandemic, tomorrow I could be anywhere. So I've always been aware of that, and I've got a very fond memory of years ago when my BBG and Papaji were still with us, and I hope they rest in peace. I was on a project in Australia, and I was living in Australia for a while, and grateful for my parents having supported that opportunity. And I was coming back from Australia to London, and supposed to be in Spain for work for whatever reason. However, when I landed in London, it transpired my family, my parents, and my brother and my sister were in Punjab, and I got terribly jealous. So I decided to call my company and say, guys, I'm not going to make it to Spain. I can, thank God there's technology. I will dial into a few calls, but I'm going to Punjab. So and that's privilege, right? Because I was able to fly across from Australia all the way over to London and then land in Punjab. And the memories I have is sitting in the bin with my BBG and my Papaji, and my BBG looking at my passport, and I was telling her my stories of when I've been to Russia for work, and many places, right, that they wouldn't even dream of going to. And my BBG held my passport in her hand, and she said, "तो मैं तेरी अक्खा थानी सारी दुनिया देख ली." And tear to my eye, because how can I not be grateful, right? How can I not, knowing that I had the support of my grandparents to that level. I'm blessed and grateful and aware of my sorry, I'm getting emotional, of my privilege in that respect.
Look, it says, so much about you in terms of the fact that you are fully aware that your forefathers, and your foremothers, if that's what you can call them,
Yes, of course.
made sacrifices, and made sacrifices to get here, because nobody gets here alone, right? But look,
No.
let's move along, because we've got a fantastic career to talk about. So you travel all over the world.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, you're especially that I think you're always on holiday, which is great.
They do. They do.
Yeah, but why wouldn't they? The average person travels maybe once or maybe twice a year, and you perhaps travel, I don't know, 20 times out of the country or whatever it may be. You probably lose count, right?
Mm-hmm.
So tell us about your career, and obviously there's certain things that you can't talk about. And the other thing I'm really interested in is, because when we first talked about you coming onto the show, as you know how strongly I feel about the fact that we ought to be putting back into our community, especially those of us that have had a lot of success. And as you've certainly said, you're grateful for the opportunities that were given to you by the work ethics that your parents installed, and the sheer opportunity and the risk they took in actually traveling 4,000 miles from India without any jobs, any prospects, any money. And so, what's happening is successful people are moving out of our communities and going away. And I think it's like a brain drain. Whereas we got a fantastic people like yourselves, and now coming back with shows like this, helping to put something back into the community, giving good advice, and being real role models for both young men and young women, and giving advice to some parents that may not have the careers or the experience or the education that you have. And so it's a wonderful opportunity, isn't it, for us to actually put back something that we've taken out of our communities, because our community is absolutely fantastic. And,
yeah, I can't agree
really,
more.
yeah. So tell us about how you got into these positions, what you do today, and what's the best bits about your job, and what a difference you're making to people.
Okay, thank you. So that's a couple of questions. I'll try and answer them all. If I miss anything, please do let me know. So a little bit about kind of how I got to where I am. So I mentioned the Australia story. So with the Mexican cement company, I had the opportunity of working on a post-merger integration in Australia. And that was a fantastic opportunity. I worked over there. It was bloody hard work, right? So I'm not going to say it was a holiday, but it was bloody hard work. I don't know if I can say that, sorry. It was hard work. And, after that, I moved to Spain, and I was working in the improvement elements, and I became aware of the need of understanding people for when we do change. So ultimately, the kind of umbrella of what I do is transformation, and under that is a lot of coaching, be that personal or professional, and be that for individuals or organizations. So then I worked on a lot of different multifaceted projects, global projects with nature, and I was, as you said, traveling all over the world, and I wouldn't have given it up in a heartbeat. It's fantastic opportunities that I was given. And once I came back to the UK, I wanted to try my hand at consulting and see if I could use those skill sets that I'd learned in that industry on other industries. So I've been working with a number of different industries through consulting and independently to really see how I can help people transform their companies. and transform them on a people perspective as well. And being of an ethnic minority, I've always been the voice of a minority, and it's not just being a Punjabi minority. It may be somebody that's disabled, or it may be somebody of the LGBTQI community. So I'm really cognizant of the fact that we should have diverse thinking, and that's the type of work I've been doing and been an ambassador for across the piece, right? With industries, and it's very important. And how do I want to give back? I think that was part of the question. Is on platforms like this, I want to be able to talk to youth. Go if I would before the pandemic, I used to go to schools and I would talk to them just about the opportunities that they have that are not the traditional path. So I would like to do more of that, and I think we should all do that. And how can we all give back? So one of the things I do in every company that I've worked for is I try and understand the procurement process, because if we are minority businesses, and there's lots of minority businesses out there, we might not necessarily know how can we open the doors to work with large corporations. So we should all take the time to understand those processes, which might be complex, right? So one thing that we can all do, wait tomorrow, understand what is the company you work for, what is their agenda for diversity, and what are they trying to do in that space, and what can you do? Because that's how I started years ago. I was when I was working for the Mexican company, I said, well, we're trying to do some work. Why can't we use an Indian firm? And we were very lucky that we were sourced an Indian firm, and we were able to get some work done through that firm. And we have to obviously consider the correct capacity and the capabilities of the firm, right? So I'm by no ways am I promoting using one firm purely because of their ownership, but I'm saying let's get our voices heard. Let's knock on those doors. So that's what I would urge everybody to be doing.
So really, what, as you said, it's not because they're an Indian firm, but the fact is that you're getting these companies to consider a minority-owned firm, not just Indians, but people of any color, people of any race, background, and indeed, those that are disabled. So
Yeah.
how can people sort of find out? Because we can't all ring you up tomorrow and say, could you get my company some work? How can people...
You can, but I'm not sure I'll be able to help. So there are companies out there that you can register with, so that the companies out there you can register with that will help you partner with large corporations. So it's just simply a case of finding out. If you go to large corporate websites, so for example, if you go on to Coca-Cola's website, if you go onto Unilever's website, they've got fantastic programs that they're doing in the ED&I space, where they're making commitments to spend more money and give back to the community and open the doors. So it's not that difficult, but it's up to us to go out there and find those resources for us. By all means, if there's anything I can do personally, I will do. However, look at those websites, understand what they're doing, understand those procurement processes, and then let's upskill ourselves to know what does it take to work with such big organizations. And me personally, sorry.
No, I was going to say, so would that come as part of their CSR, their corporate social responsibility? Would they be looking to work with smaller companies and those with minorities, etc.? Is where do you look? Because I can imagine we've taken Coca-Cola as an example. International billion-dollar company, they'll have a huge website. Where would somebody go to look to find out how they could interact with an organization like that?
So you can simply just Google Coca-Cola diversity supplier management, and you can do the same for Unilever. And there's commitments that have been made by them to increase their spend with minority owned, managed, and controlled organizations. So they're making commitments, and they're also supporting. And those are just two that I'm naming. There's many more out there that are doing similar things. And then that's what we should be. We should be looking at those and knocking on their doors. And what the other thing? Sorry.
No, go. You go.
And the other thing that we should be doing is that the people that are working in companies, we should be raising our voices. We should be talking from this. So we need to have a double-pronged attack, right? So from internally, we should be questioning our procurement teams if we work for these large organizations. What is our process? Do we have any aspirations to be more working with more diverse and inclusive organizations? So we can't just rely on one kind of route. All of us have a voice, right? And collectively, if we use that voice, it's much more powerful. So that's what I would suggest. There's lots of ethnic minorities, lots of Punjabis, lots of Sikhs out there that are working in large organizations. If every single one of us went to our procurement team and said, can we just help a little bit more? The doors are open. The doors are open for help. Everybody wants to be helping the underrepresented companies. And I think we all need to be doing our bit.
That's incredible advice, right? So what we're saying is, if you're a business, go and have a look at the company's website of the field that you're in. They've got a corporate social responsibility, they've got a diversity policy, and they've got also policies whereby they want to interact with their local communities. So perhaps there's a plant of somebody like Coca-Cola in your community. They want to procure goods and services from those communities and be seen and actually put things back. But equally, if we're talking mainly to the Punjabi community or the Sikh community, if you are a professional working in these types of organizations and they're not doing this, you've got every right to ask your company for that question. Why are we not procuring more contracts from minority-owned businesses? And then, as Sukh said, that's a two-pronged attack that will get us to where we want to eventually. Look, if you were of the community, sorry, Sukh, go on.
I just wanted to add another thing that may or may not be relevant. As part of being a diversity and inclusion ambassador, I've had male English-owned companies reach out to me, and there's one example that I've got permission to talk about. It's a VA Consulting, and they're an English male-owned company, and they reached out to me to help them on their equity and diversity journey. They've asked me and they've got an appetite, right? So I think that is so fantastic. So a company like that is successful in their own right, they do fantastic work in training and unconscious bias and all of this lovely arena. And for them to reach out to me because they're aware of their own internal footprint not being diverse. And I've been helping them on that journey to how can they get more diverse and what can they do to be more inclusive. So if I can help one company to do that, they will then pay back to other companies. So I just wanted to say that it's not just the large organizations, it's the smaller organizations as well that are wanting to be diverse, and we can all be supporting them.
What a wonderful story. And as you said, look, the thing is, we read about racism, we read about all sorts of things in the news, and that's all we see. Because the thing is, the news reports on bad things, but the vast majority of people, vast majority of companies, company owners, shareholders want to do the right thing. They're not isolated from what's going on out there. They're not isolated from the farmers' dispute. They're not isolated from Black Lives Matter. They're not isolated from what's going on in the world, and they read the papers just like we do. And so the thing is, they want to do the right thing. But sometimes if you're an organization, as Sukh said, who doesn't know how to reach out, who hasn't got any people of minority working for you, or they haven't got any people of minorities that are willing to stand up and say, listen, can I take this back into my community to see if there's any companies that we can contract and work with, then those companies are equally looking for your business so that they can, really clear their consciences and do their civic duty, which is what most of us want to do. So I'd just like to add one thing. A lot of our minority businesses don't have a great presence online. Their websites generally don't look brilliant. I'm not saying everybody, obviously, but you must have a presence. You must have social media presence. So the big organizations like LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, they're vital for you to have a presence, so that companies looking for these kind of opportunities to share with you, tell them what it is that you do. Nobody's going to come knocking on your door if the doors are shut and you don't tell anybody what it is that you're doing. And a lot of our community ignores these new social media channels that are available to all of us. We can become international businesses overnight simply by having a website, Facebook presence, LinkedIn presence that actually opens the whole of the market up. The reason that people like Ravi Singh, the reason that Sukh Randhawa is here is because of my reach on LinkedIn. And that's what's going on, and that's how I find people and people find me, because we've got a huge presence and we're active on social media. And so don't underestimate. And again, let's go back. If you're an older person operating a company, ask your kids. They're on social media all day long, and if they're on it, so are the people, right? So it's a great project that a generation or two of you or three of you can cooperate on. Ask your kids, hey, what are you on? How does this Instagram stuff work? And and suddenly you can have a great hobby and a great way to make your company actually available and be out there. Open those arms so that people can come and you can receive. Don't be closed and sit there thinking, where's the business going to come from? You've got to go out and outreach. Those companies are looking for you and you're looking for those companies. So go and have a marriage made in heaven. What do you think, Sukh?
I think that's fantastic. And you said 2 or 3 things there that I really want to touch on. So number one, most definitely have a presence on social media. If the pandemic has taught us anything, it's absolutely critical to have a social media presence if we want to be successful in whichever field that we're working in, right? So let's make sure that we all do that. So that's definitely something I would do. And I would suggest that the reach expands, as exactly as Kam said. You may have had a business that is only going to be by word of mouth or the people that you happen to know. But the second you get yourselves onto a social media platform, for example, LinkedIn for professional work, and I know Instagram's used by a lot of organizations and startup businesses as well. Your reach expands, so all of a sudden you can be international. So 100% agree with that. The second thing I wanted to say is you mentioned Ravi Singh. So I just wanted to say I've got a lot of respect for Ravi Singh and Carl Saeed. So I just wanted to give a Sat Sri Akal and thank you for all of the seva that Carl Saeed and Ravi Singh do. The third thing you mentioned was the farmers' protest. And it would be remiss of me not to touch upon that, given that I am a granddaughter of a farmer and I am from Punjab. And as you heard earlier, if my parents hadn't come to this country, I would potentially could have been in Punjab myself. So for those of you that are not aware, I will say a few things. I'm not very learned in this subject, so please don't take my word for gospel. Just from my understanding, 3 farm laws have been passed without adequate consultation, and there's been protests taking place in India for a number of months now, and the protests are across the whole of India from all states. So that is across Rajasthan, Punjab, Haryana, across all of states, and they're currently in Delhi. And they've been there for a number of months now. And it's no longer just a farmers' protest. There's laborers there, there's activists, there's journalists, and it's a human rights issue. So I would just like to take this opportunity to ask everybody to please educate yourselves on what is happening. There's human rights issue happening right now as we are here. We talked about privilege earlier. So all of us are privileged to even be watching the show from the comfort of our homes. There's many people that are sleeping on the streets right now, and their human rights are being violated. So I just would like to just pledge and plea that if we can all take a moment to educate ourselves on that subject. I just thought it'd be remiss if I didn't mention that, Kam.
No, fabulous. No, great opportunity. And, you know, there's a tragedy unfolding there in, as we said, human rights, etc. Look, you know, there's wrongs and rights on both sides, and we haven't got time to go into that here. But the fact is that if you've got family members that are protesting, you know, and it's really close to home, then obviously we feel for you right now. And those of you that are on protesting, you know, one thing that we're really proud of is organizations like Khalsa Aid, Midlands Langar Seva Society, and many, many others are helping. You know, I speak to Ravi on a regular basis, and the amount of volunteers that are there from the Punjab alone is huge. He was saying only last week that there's actually not enough work for all the volunteers that are there. And the donations that come to them, most of the donations are coming in actual goods and services, so blankets, food, etc. So when you're sending your money, just be careful where it's going. Right, that's all I should say on the subject. And you know, and that is something that we shall visit at some point in the future. So thank you very much for bringing that up, Sukh, towards the end of the program. So listen, you know, time really runs by fast, and most of my guests are terrified that it's going to be an hour, and then when we're about to finish, they say, "Is that it?" So, any last words to our audience in closing?
So I think I think everybody should take the opportunities that are given to them, right? We work very hard. Our parents worked very hard to allow us to even have these opportunities. And we don't necessarily have to follow the traditional path. Let's keep the communications open. And I would just say, let's look at ourselves as well. We don't want to be looking at other people. I promote self-development, and I think it's very important to look at inwards and understand yourself. And then once you can understand yourself, you can then influence others. And that's a lot of the work that I do globally as well. So I don't know if we've got time to touch upon a little bit more of the global element of the work that I do, but if this, I'm not quite sure we are on time, I do apologize. But that's kind of what my message would be, is everybody should take an opportunity to look after themselves, their mental health as well. And let's together become more diverse and inclusive as a society.
Fantastic. So as in TV forever, we'll leave that for another episode. We'll leave the audience hanging. Thank you so much for that today. But guys, you know, it's the end of another program. We've had a wonderful time. Really interesting views from Sukh. You know, we'd never have enough time on this show. There's so many other things that we could have talked about. But if you've got any questions for her, by all means, address them to myself, and we can have a follow-up, or I can come back to you and report back. It'd be lovely to have Sukh back and talking about some of the international work that she does. Really interesting careers. If you are a professional person and you've got something to say and can add to the community and enrich us and build us up, please get in touch with me. Would love to have you on the show. If you've watched the show tonight, I hope you enjoyed it. And as much as I do presenting these shows and bringing guests like Sukh, people of our own community who have really done well, but haven't forgotten their roots and still willing to put something back. You know, they do this of their own free will and free time. So it's a wonderful thing. And I can't thank people like this enough, because without them, I wouldn't have this show and you wouldn't be able to enjoy their experiences. So we've got an amazing show for you next week that I can talk about. So we're on location at the IXL in Leamington. So my good friend Atul Lakhani is going to be talking about the government's response in terms of weddings and how they're going to pan out and what he thinks will happen as hopefully lockdown restrictions are eased and we can once again start to party and dance at our amazing weddings, because obviously they've been off for about a year or so, but it looks like somewhere in June, July time, we'll be able to meet again. Viah shadiyan pa dekh sakte hain, celebrate kar sakte hain once again. And you know, so those wedding invitations will start coming very soon. So just wanted to thank the team today, because, you know, Desi Jar, you can't beat it. And thank you, Gagan and the team, for bringing me copious amounts of tea and water whilst we're here. I will see you again next week from the IXL Centre in Leamington with my guest Atul Lakhani. I'd like to thank Sukh Randhawa for her time, and also to her family who were threatening to gate crashes at some point. Ask them to come in now, Sukh. We're done now. So thank you so much. Goodbye. We'll see you next week.
Thank you. Let's stay in Chardi Kala.